So hello and welcome to the Expat Pod. My name is James, your host, and today I'm joined by Robin. And Robin, we met via Facebook, I think, where I put a question out to a group we were both in, and you responded saying you'd love to be a guest. So thank you, first of all, for doing that. And if you could please share where you're from, where you've lived, and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Robin. I'm originally from Italy, but I've lived around the world. Started off pretty young, actually. I've lived in Germany as well, in Holland, in England, Ireland, Canada, and the US and Austria. And now I'm in Canada. By the way, I went from expat to full immigrant. Got a kind of an upgrade there. And then I am a mentor, a speaker, and an educator for people who want to travel more, travel full time, and earn income online.
Amazing. Well, I'm sure we'll unpack your journeys in the main podcast. So welcome to section 1 of the podcast, all about getting there. So Robin, essentially this is where I kind of want to understand, all the things you needed to do before you left. But before we do that, I want to know your why. So what was the reason for wanting to move and live abroad? What was the kind of desire you had to live in all these amazing places?
I think it started off when I was a kid. I always remember reading. I was an avid reader when I was a kid. Definitely lost a bit of that skill as I grew up and as I went to uni and stuff. But I've always been into this adventure kind of books. And I remember two particular series of books that I was reading as a kid. One was this girl and her aunt, and they were exploring Italy, and they were going through every region and having adventures around, which obviously was, it felt very close and very feasible to me because I was living in Italy. And another one was there's two siblings, and they were they had a tree house that was bringing them on these adventures across times and space and whatever. And it was super cool. And so I always had this kind of adventure seeking feeling in me. And I think by the fact that I've been, I moved a lot when I was younger with my family. And I think that just fueled something that I already kind of had. When I was 12 years old, we moved to Germany with my family. And obviously that was a crazy culture shock, language shock, everything. I didn't speak anything but Italian. It was almost, I've always loved languages. So I was dreaming. I was 10 years old or something. So I was just dreaming of, speaking English. I was babbling things that I thought sounded like English, but they weren't. Reading and trying to really learn a new language because I found it fascinating to be able to speak to others. And so I think, though, that was a very pivoting chapter for my life because it was my first international experience, having to deal with, people from different countries, mostly Europe, but also a couple that were outside of Europe. So obviously it was a very, very different. And it kind of changed me and made me, for sure, miss my country. So I was really looking forward. I was no, I want to go back to Italy. I miss certain things about Italy and the Italian lifestyle. But then when I went back to Italy and finished high school there, I knew that I had to get back out. I was missing the international lifestyle. I was missing speaking different languages. And so when I was 18, I left Italy, and I haven't actually lived there full time again ever since. So it's been a while that I've been abroad, and it's been fantastic. And I've done a lot of different, I call it travel lifestyles. So I was, a student abroad at first, and I was an expat for a little bit because I was doing internships and staying for a little bit in different countries, working holidays and so on. And I say, backpacking, nomad, all these different ways to travel and explore the world. And then ended up in Canada about 4 years ago now, more permanently. And yeah, very happy, even moved here. So I guess for me, the new challenge in my own journey is settling down and calming down a bit, because it's something different after you've been moving and starting over for 14 years, right? But I think that's kind of an organic part of the journey where you kind of start to also be okay, I want to have a base and travel from there. But yeah, that's how it all started. It kind of just organically became my life.
Wow, that's incredible. And where did you go when you were 18, and where did you move to? Which country did you study in, or did you go to when you left Italy?
It was Holland. Yeah, I studied psychology in Holland. And then between my bachelor and master, I did like 1 year gap year. And during the gap year, I moved a lot. It was mostly Europe, but I moved a lot around Europe, half working, half just traveling. So really taking my time before jumping into, my next academic, I guess, endeavor. And then within my master, I did half of my master. It was a 1 year master. I did half of that in California, in the US. And after that, I was like, I want to be living outside of Europe, because I had lived at that point in time. I had lived a lot in different parts of Europe, like north, center, south, right? There was something after living in California. I was like, wow, like it's so, in a way, also convenient to be here, because then I can like travel to Latin America more easily, to Asia more easily. And so I think that's what brought me to eventually, move on this other side of the pond, let's say.
And then when you were applying for your kind of education, then what drew you to the Netherlands or Holland? Did you look at other schools in other parts of Europe? Because I know, obviously you can move quite freely between education, and I guess the price doesn't matter too much within mainland Europe. If you go to the UK, it's a bit more expensive, but for let's say Holland, it's probably quite a similar price. So I'm assuming you had a lot of choice within mainland Europe of where you'd like to study and what you'd like to study. So was there other universities or countries which were high on your list?
Yeah, well, no, I definitely applied for different ones. So it's kind of funny how, life plans out for you in a way. But I applied for UK universities, and then the one in Holland, and then one in Valencia, because it was like a bilingual psychology, social science program. And I actually got accepted in the ones in the UK as well. But after going to the intro week in the one in Holland, I just loved it. It was so international, and it was just such a good vibe. And it wasn't just about the money per se, where it's like, like at the time, I think I was still in time to get a slightly lower price for the UK universities. But it was just a feeling. And then even kind of how it didn't work out, because my first choice was Valencia, because I was like, yeah, of course I'm going to Spain. I probably would have never graduated, but I was, like really wanting to go to Spain. But it didn't work out with the documents. So it was really like, it got to the point where it was in between Holland and Spain. But there was like a delay, or I had to send an extra set of documents. And then that's why I kind of was like, okay, whatever, I'll go to the intro week, see how it goes, see. And during the intro week, I found a house, and then I met these people, and then it just like clicked. And I was like, I need to go here. And then you go into your also gut feeling. And it worked out. It was a great place, met great people, and it's one of the, well, to go back to your first question, how I chose, it wasn't just country. Obviously, Spain was also for the country. I love Spain and the weather, and its similar lifestyle to Italy. But it was also about the ranking of the university. So like I wanted to go to specific courses within social sciences and psychology more specifically. And so I kind of looked at universities that had, well-ranked courses around what I wanted to study for, research and all this kind of like educational aspects of it.
City did you move to, in the Netherlands? Was it Amsterdam or Rotterdam or The Hague or?
Unknown one called Groningen, which is like super north. So I did my bachelor there and my master's.
Near Amsterdam. Because I had a job interview at a place called Balk, which is the other side of the bay, which is not far from Zwolle. And I nearly moved to Zwolle.
Yeah, Zwolle.
Oh my God. Yeah, I nearly moved to Zwolle at some point in my life before Brexit. But alas, I chose a different company. But I know that part, because it's the west and north part of the Netherlands it seems to go to, but you go further east and it's a bit different.
It's different, yeah. North of Holland is pretty different from the south, even though it's a relatively small country.
And then, when you moved from the Netherlands, what was your next move again? Sorry.
In Netherlands, I lived in the US for a little bit, and then I went back to Italy to just save money for like a few months and get money to go to Canada. So Canada was kind of my next one there, but it was on a working holiday. And then I wanted to stay, but my visa expired, which, the feeling, because we were chatting about it earlier, right? Sometimes I think that's kind of like the harder part or the sad part for people who want to keep on moving. Like there is a certain point where you can do everything that is in your power to like move or stay in a country. But then you get to bureaucracy and, limitations that are outside of anything you can do, such as what passport you have, such as having, only, for example, for Canada, as Italian, you only have 1 year working visa. After that, you either get sponsored or you can't stay, right? So it gets complicated at some point. But it kind of worked out in the way that I went back to Europe. I lived in Ireland for a little bit. And then because of my work experience in Ireland, I got sponsored to come back to Canada with a job. And then COVID hit, and I've been here ever since.
So when you moved then to Canada the first time, what was the process like for that? Was it quite easy to apply for the working holiday visa, or was it long-winded? What was the kind of timeline for going, I want to move to Canada, to being on a plane? Is it a couple of months, a couple of weeks?
So it's been a while, so I can't fully remember like the exact amount of time, but I have to say, like, generally as European, at least with an European Union passport or a Commonwealth passport, it is quite fast. So everything was online. It was, like a lot of visas, it's about getting criminal check done and getting, like certain documentations over. So it was all like an online portal. And I remember that I don't know the exact amount of weeks, but I don't think it was longer than a month. It was pretty fast. And it was a working holiday, so they're a bit more, like, unless there's something like very wrong with the application, that they need to hold it. With the working holiday, at least at the time, they were definitely a bit more easygoing. This was before COVID. And I actually had, because my plan was actually to do Canada and then go to Australia. I never made it to Australia, but life happens. But it was similar. So the working holiday process was similar to the Canadian process. So I kind of like did them like simultaneously. And yeah, the main thing is age, right? For example, now I wouldn't be able to apply anymore. I think it's about 30 years old for Australia, and I want to say 35, depending on the country, 30 or 35, depending on the country of your passport for Canada.
I think it's 35 from the UK. It's my friend, he and his girlfriend, they road tripped from the UK to New Zealand, and it was 35. So they had to get there before they turned 35. Well, they did, but it was pretty close.
Okay, so I can still do it in New Zealand. Yeah, I think like working holiday visas in general are such a great foot in the door in a country. It's, obviously you can also be limited depending on the luck you have for a job, right? There's certain limitations, like let's say more full-time permanent positions. They may frown upon having a working visa just because they know that you may have to leave in 6-12 months time. But if, you just want to like test out a country, being able to legally work in the country, it's a great way. And then that way you can also network. Like, I think people I met and so on, like in Canada, through that, these are also, still my friends. And that network also helped me then find something, to go back to as well. So I think whenever you move first to a country, there's always a bit of that first month's sacrifice. I mean, when I first moved to Canada, I was doing like 3 jobs, kitchen assistant, working in a pub as a waitress, and then like working or helping out for seasonal events. So, like you do things like that, and then that will get you, from there, then I moved into more like supervisor positions. So it starts to get you into different positions because you start to know people and you start to network and things like that. So I think it's very much worth it. I'm a big advocate for working holiday visas for people who want to test a bit of work and travel and maybe fall in love with a new country, and then you have to figure out how to stay there permanently.
Massively. And then, so on that topic then, when you were living in Ireland, were you always looking to go back to Canada? Was that your kind of destination?
Yeah, like I had it. Like, I knew Ireland was only temporary. I wanted to go back to Canada, to go back to this side of, of the ocean. It was probably the first time in my life that when I had to leave Canada, that I had to leave and it wasn't my choice. Because otherwise I was always lucky enough, especially in Europe, the mobility is very easy, right? Like, you just need an European Union passport to move. It's not really like, oh my God, my visa expired kind of situation.
It was for some other.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Sorry. European Union passport.
I mean, mine's still a EU passport. It is still 2028, and I've got a European work. My driving license is still European.
Maybe you can use that. Maybe you can trick the system. It's like, I don't need a visa. Yeah, sorry. So besides the UK, of course, for everybody else, like in Europe, as part of with the European Union, it's a very different thing, and you don't realize how how, in a way, lucky you are. Like you do, but you also don't fully how lucky you are that that's the case, that you can live in a totally different country with a totally different culture, history, and language, and not have to worry as much about the bureaucracy if you're, from Europe. And so I think for me, like, obviously California was the other one. So California and Canada really showed you how it differs the moment you want to be an immigrant as well, like full-on immigrant, like so more permanently in the country, working and staying permanently in the country. And you realize what you really can't control. And it's very upsetting at first because you're like, it's not your choice, right? Like you've always used to, or at least I was always used to, like moving because I wanted to move. Right? I chose Canada, I chose Holland, like all these places, like I kind of chose to go there because I was like, yeah, let's go, let's see what happens. And like not having that in your control feels very different. And it took a while. It took a while to get over it for sure. It all worked out. And I guess this is kind of what you learn with moving around a lot and traveling. It's kind of like, you figure it out at the end. It works out one way or the other, I guess.
And before you moved in these places, have you always had accommodation planned, or I guess places to go or be in? Was it hostels or Airbnbs for the start whilst you're finding your feet? What was that kind of process like from being so far away from your destination?
Accommodation-wise, it really depended on what I had. So I was lucky a couple of times. So for example, California, I had something because I was going to uni. So like through that, I found like a kind of website where I could try to find a room, and then I found a room before going, so kind of worked out really well. Similar for Holland, for example, it was during the intro week, just found somebody, say, hey, I have this room, and then from there it was like temporary. It was just like a 2 months kind of like sublease, and then it gave me 2 months to find something. There's a lot of websites. I really like suggest the listeners to really like look up what kind of websites they have in that country. Every country has a bit of a different one where you can find. So, for example, I still remember it. One, I don't even know if it exists anymore in Holland because it's been a while. But there was one called Culinary, something like that is one that I used like for Germany. So there's like different websites that you can use. And at the time, and I think it's something that works still, is also Facebook groups and Facebook advertisement, like people like posting in their room on Facebook. And if not, I always suggest, and this is something I suggest people, even like if they're traveling, a bit, they have a bit more months, they're on the road for a bit longer, or they're staying in a place a bit longer, is to find something temporary at first so that you can really realize, okay, this is the area I want to be, this is like a good place or not. And then kind of go from there and not just like necessarily, go and commit to 12 months lease without really knowing even if the place is actually in a good spot, right? Or if you like the room, or if you like, who you live with, if you're sharing a house. But yeah, for Canada, I was in a hostel at first and then moved again, through people in the hostel, found a room, and then that gave me some time to then, go and have a viewing for another room. So it really depends. I think in general, like you just have to be very proactive. And for me, personal experience, it worked always really well to have something short term at first, figure it out, and then if anything, commit to something for longer term. If you know that you're staying for like 12 months, then you can find something for 12 months.
Yeah, no, that's a very good bit of advice for the short term. You said that completely. I once lived in a place called Kensington in Liverpool. I thought it was a very nice part of Liverpool. It wasn't, because Kensington in London's very nice.
There you go.
It doesn't translate.
And sometimes the internet doesn't help.
Yeah, so you need to make sure you, as you said, try and get short term, or Facebook groups are really good as well for getting advice on places to live. Is there anything else you needed to do before you kind of moved, or should we go into section 2?
The only other thing I would suggest is, besides what we discussed, which is obviously visa, that's a big part, right? Accommodation is also kind of looking at, the lifestyle, doing a bit of a research about whether the country or the city, just to get an idea of it, what to expect, right? Talking to people who are there, so that when you're there, especially if it's kind of new to you, if it's like kind of the first time you do this, or if you have any sort of like more fears around doing the move, it really helps to talk to other people, to inform yourself, because automatically you will feel it's a safer choice when you have more information around it and you have a bit less of unknown in you. So that's the only other thing I would suggest to do if you have a bit more, concerns about moving.
I guess it's a great bit of advice for sure. Yeah, do your research, or do your own research, and don't always just believe everything people say. And things change over time as well, which is also why it's probably very important to stay up to date with current affairs, perhaps in your new home or potential new home. So welcome to the second part of the podcast, all about being there. So, Robin, this is essentially your first impressions initially. So, when you first moved, maybe from Italy to Germany, perhaps when you were young, what was that like? How did you find the difference? Obviously, different language, very different cuisine, different a lot of different things in Germany. Which James, I'm curious, which part of Germany did you move to? I didn't think I asked you that question, but.
Frankfurt, which is probably also a very specific city. I think, well, also considering the age, right? I was 12 years old. I did not speak the language. And I think that's why I always feel and trying to make people feel involved or included when they are not in an environment. Even with English, if somebody is not like native speaker English, I always try to make sure they feel included, because not knowing the language makes things much harder, because it's harder to communicate with people, it's harder to make friends, it's harder to feel integrated overall. Language is such a big part, and that's why the time, and even my business started off as a tutoring for Spanish and Italian. It's a huge power. It's not just I can get jobs because of this language, or I can live somewhere else, but it's also from a experience of your travels, experience of living abroad changes a lot if you know the local language. For me, the biggest, and then I want to be specific, it's Frankfurt specifically. I think Frankfurt is a bit different. I've now known, I've been around Germany quite a lot, lived also in other cities later on in life, which were a completely different experience than what I'm about to say. But I think the not knowing the language, and Frankfurt specifically, was kind of what made my culture shock stronger. I had no idea what people were saying. I thought everything sounded particularly aggressive because I didn't understand. And that's kind of how funny it is, how I cannot feel that anymore because I speak German now. And so I understand what they're saying. And so I don't have that first reaction. But as a 12-year-old, even, hearing about show your ticket or something, on the tube, as you say, on the metro and stuff, even that sounded like intense, because I had no idea what they actually meant. And then I would see people giving tickets, and I was like, oh, he's the, or I would see the hat, and then I was like, oh, okay, he's just the ticket, guy. But I struggled a lot with integrating. I was in an international school, so actually I was learning English, which is funny. I learned English in Germany because it was the second language. I had subjects in English, so that was my priority. And I actually started understanding German pretty fast. But then I couldn't answer, right? And I couldn't answer in English either because I was still learning it. And so I think that was probably the toughest part of it. And all my first months, I spent it with people who spoke Italian. And so it makes integration much harder because then I'm not integrating with anybody else, but whoever speaks Italian, and, family, obviously, that was fine. But what I will always remember, though, is the people, and specifically two of girlfriends of mine from that period of time, who were so kind to me and were literally trying anything to try to talk to me. Hands, literally anything, almost drawing, right, and learning random Italian words to be able to talk to me, because I guess they felt bad because they could see I was trying to, but I couldn't connect, I couldn't communicate, and so without communication, you can't connect to people. And that was such a hard time, the first months, but also pretty stubborn, and love languages really helped, because then I would say within it probably expedited my learning English, and having this need to connect with people, communicate to people, was making me really I need to learn. And so I was taking every very embarrassing interaction at first, because I felt it's frustrating when you learn a new language and you can't express yourself, and you have all this thing in your head and nothing comes out to your mouth, right? It's you're this whole different person, right? And I think Sofia Vergara, I just saw a video where she says, it's how smart I am in Spanish. And it's funny, but it's also so true. in a way, like part of your personality and your person is connected to that language and the ability you have to express yourself in that language. But yeah, like the need to communicate, the love for languages, the fact that I had no choice, really expedited it. And I would say that probably by, month 2, I wouldn't say my English was great, but I could at least communicate something. And I was learning so many words because I decided, you know what? It feels awful that I can barely put a sentence together. It feels embarrassing. You're also 12. You're going through your teenage problems. Like this was just additional to just being a normal teenager. Then I started. And because of like putting myself out there and like trying and be like, this, and then they're like earring, and you're like, okay, earring, and then you have to remember vocabulary and stuff like that, and it worked. And then one moment, like as soon as I started speaking better English and then speaking a bit more German and at least understanding everything in German, that was a pivoting moment for me in how I felt and making friends and all these things. So definitely the first year was hard, and probably this first 6 months were the hardest, but you learn a lot. And I think that made me very also empathic and sensitive to people who are in similar situation where, they're like, don't know what's going on. They don't speak the language. I feel like Mama Bear when I see that happening, because it's not nice. The people who were kind to me when I wasn't able to communicate, I want to be that person to other people. And so that's kind of my biggest learning from that.
Did that then translate when you moved to the Netherlands? So obviously Dutch and Deutsch, very similar, or Nederlands is probably the correct term of the language, isn't it? It's not even Dutch. But they're not too dissimilar, because having tried to learn both, they're very similar languages, like Dankevel and Danke. You can intertwine them quite nicely. But was that annoying for you, or did it help you a lot when you were maybe trying to learn Dutch, because it was a similar sentence structure? You maybe add more vowels, perhaps, but did you end up using like a mix between the two languages, or was it able to help you learn the Dutch?
So it definitely helped. And I think, to be honest, like after that experience when I was 12 years old, learning English and German on top of it, after that, again, I love the languages already. And going through that really helped me learning others. So then I learned Spanish. And when I went to Holland, first of all, they all speak English, and they're like, oh my God, like if you try, they're like, oh my God, your accent is so cute. And you're like, I want to speak Dutch. Like, I don't want to be cute or sound cute. I want to speak properly. So I definitely took a course because I believe in learning the language of the place, especially if you live in the place. So I would say it's very, very basic conversational. So I don't really count it as a language I fully speak. But no, I think because of that experience, learning any other language became easier. I know how I work. I know how I learn languages, and knowing, like Latin languages such as Spanish and Italian, then a very different language such as German, and then English on the other side, which is your lifeboat, right? Like if you ever need, you can always try some English and see if that one works. So no, it definitely shaped, and it definitely opened so many doors for me just going through that. It's a whole new world that opens up, and not just from like being able to learn more easily. I feel like after you learn a couple of languages, like your own language and a second language, you are a bit more prone to like learn faster other languages. If you like to learn languages, you don't have to. I think 2 is enough usually. But yeah, I think it was like I call it like a trampoline in that sense for my, future life.
And then kind of going throughout the years, but as you've worked, how have you found kind of making friends in new places? Maybe not when you've gone for university, because it seems obviously quite easy. You're kind of thrown into a melting pot of other students who are all enjoying a new place, but maybe more as an adult by yourself. Have you found it difficult to kind of make friends initially, or have you found ways in which you've been able to do that?
Yeah, I agree. Like it's definitely as you age, and also as you start like more the working, life, it can become definitely harder than when you're like at university and everybody wants to be friends and everybody wants to, is on the same boat. Things that have helped me, and I would, suggest people is, well, first of all, is staying in hostels does help at first. I think for at least an introduction to the city and like getting to know places and getting to know first people, that helps. You do get to a point where if you want to stay more permanently, that's hard. I think in Canada I was lucky because there were more people who were also staying for like a year or were also staying, more long term, and still have friends who are like, still here permanently, also trying to move ahead in this immigration ladder we're on. But we all met like at the hostel, right? So that was just luck, to be honest. But I think, yeah, hostels can be like a great intro. And that's also a way to maybe find those couple of people who are trying to do a similar journey as you. Another one is sometimes, depends who you work for, but if you move for work, hopefully, I mean, you get some like nice colleagues and you can, bond with them, and they can be like a foot in the door to like then meeting other people and so on. So it's not always necessarily bad. I think though, of course, if you are fully remote and you live in a country, that's different. And I think this is something that may be more like as digital nomad, right? Or as a full-time remote worker, because maybe you already had a job and you just moved country, not necessarily for a job, just for a lifestyle perspective, then in general, you always have to be more proactive, right? You are the new kid in town. A lot of the effort goes on you, and you cannot be afraid to make first moves and put a bit of effort into it at the beginning, because hopefully it pays off. So if you're a full-time remote worker in a new country, there is nowadays, I would say, it's almost easier than back in the time when I was, moving around at first. There's so many apps, there's so many associations, there's so many groups, there's co-working spaces that have events. There's like even for nomads, there's a lot of like events around the world for specifically nomads who want to connect, because we're humans. We need those connections. We need that feeling of belonging. So as an expat, as a nomad, like this is something that people want. So luckily nowadays, there's a lot of associations and places, and technology offers a bit more options around it. So again, it goes a bit with the research we were mentioning before. It also goes into, okay, what kind of groups can you join? What kind of app can you join? Right? Who can you reach out? Another thing that I did sometimes was a meetup, like the website, and like you can see meetups with, strangers. It doesn't always like go perfectly, but at least you tried. And then like maybe from there you get a certain information that will help you. So I would say in general, like you need to be very open-minded. You need to be ready to make the first move and yeah, kind of like test yourself and test the place you're in, and live that open-mindedness to also be spontaneous about things, and at first being like, okay, sure, like try things. I think like saying no or being like, oh, no, I can't do it, or I'm not going to go to this event. You just never know what's on the other side of the door. And at least you'll, if it doesn't go according to plan, at least you say you tried. And I feel there's always a small win, at least. There's always maybe that one person that told you something specific that whether made you feel better or is information you can use to integrate more in the country.
I think it's very good advice. Very good advice. There's more than one way to find friends or find people. And Meetup I used a lot on Facebook groups, and they were great for different reasons. Like one was finding where to watch rugby in Sweden. It's not a very popular sport anywhere else other than Commonwealth nations, perhaps. So it was quite interesting to find a pub which had that on. But also Meetup was really good for going on a Tuesday night with a bunch of internationals to a bar, and they would do that every week. And you just meet random people from all over the world, but you meet people in similar shoes to you, where they don't know anyone or were once in that stage. They might have been living there for 3 years and kept going because it was a fun place to be. That helped me quite a lot, especially when it was the winter months, and the Southern Europeans or people who aren't necessarily from the North might want to still socialise. It's quite a good thing to have done. Kind of going forward into, I guess, like being Italian, food is very important. How's that been living abroad? Obviously you moved quite young, so maybe you haven't got this an affinity, but maybe at home you had the amazing cooking. I'm not too sure. But since your travels, how have you found that? Do you miss home food, or do you see all these incredible memes or videos of Italians reacting to people cutting spaghetti or using ketchup?
Yes. I mean, there's still some things that I cannot. I would say I'm an open-minded Italian. I think, we do have really amazing food. I'm a big fan of Mediterranean food in general. I love the Mediterranean. Like, that is my habitat. And it's kind of funny because I've lived in a lot of different countries, and I'm happy to call a lot of these home or like second homes, right? Because every country held a certain chapter of my life, and it was great. I love Ireland, I love Canada, right, for different reasons. From a food perspective, there's two things or two sides of the coins in my experience. So, well, in Germany, I still had my mom cooking and she makes really good food. So I was like introduced, but I wasn't like super wild, shocked. I think what I learned by living abroad from a cuisine standpoint and also talking to people. So one thing I did during university, I was part of the integration committee of Erasmus Student Network, ESN. And so part of what I did was also literally cooking for 40 people. And it was always like a different nationality. So you had like Mexican dinner, and then you had Dutch, and then you had Italian. So it was amazing to see like people like coming in and trying different cuisine. And so one thing that now I find kind of funny when I go back to Italy is Italy, like Italian supermarkets are very Italian. There's certain things, so like I'm used, especially coming from like North America, and you like have everything, right? And you have hummus and you have pre-made whatever. You have sushi sometimes. You don't get that in the majority of the supermarket unless, I don't know about the bigger ones, but like the smaller ones I go to when I go back home, it's very different because it's targeted to Italian people. And Italian people tend to like Italian cuisine because it is tasty. Sometimes really crave it. I crave my mom's lasagna. I crave my mom's, or my grandma's ragu. Like I grew up in also a household where, cooking was important. And it was like, my mom would cook a lot and my dad too, like, fish was his thing. So like, I really grew up with this like cooking thing. And I can realize now how much more I should have appreciated it. Because now I'm lazy and sometimes I'm like making very random lunches. But
with delivery easy, right? So it's
that's right. Whatever is in the fridge at some point. But I think for me, like, it was a shock for certain things. And there's definitely still some things I'm not as open-minded to, like ketchup on pasta. And it's hilarious. Like, I definitely get triggered by cutting spaghetti, ketchup on pasta.
Pineapple on pizza.
See, and I actually was going to go there. I may get my passport taken away. I don't mind it. I actually don't. Pear on pizza, chicken on pizza, not a fan. Broccoli on pizza, also don't get it. So there's certain things that I don't get.
Banana, because in Sweden they put banana on pizza in Sweden. Yeah.
Okay.
Your face said it all. That's
doesn't sound great. If you tell me like, is it good?
I refuse. I didn't try it. I was put off by it. I was like, this seems wrong.
Yeah, it doesn't. Banana and tomato sauce alone doesn't sound good. But again, I think like, yes, there's still things that shock, but I'm usually more shocked about things about Italian cuisine specifically and ways that things are different abroad. But at the same time, a bit traveling and a bit of like me trying to understand human behavior and marketing, like my background is also in marketing. And so like, it also makes sense. Your target audience isn't Italians. So is pizza here, for example, here they put like so many different types. They forget mozzarella and then they put all these different type of cheeses on it. Because people like it, right? And so you got to the point where you just understand a bit why and you get a bit more open. And again, I've tried things like pineapple on pizza. It's actually fine. So I do have my boundaries, but I think after, being shocked about certain things, and I think there's still things that I don't fully understand, but it makes you more open-minded and it kind of makes you understand how there's, taste and flavors, but then you can see a bit of like the cultural side of things and why things are in a certain way. And one thing I do love from being abroad is access to like international cuisine. And especially here in Canada, there's like amazing, Asian cuisine, Asian restaurants, like different types. You can go from Indian to Japanese to like Thai and Vietnamese. And it's in that sense way more international, right? There's not, just Canadian restaurant. There's usually like some sort of whatever fusion or
Tim Hortons.
Yeah, constant. Tim Hortons. That's a classic. And of course, some diners are like here it's quite classic. You go to the diner. That kind of like breakfast food, similar to like the English or Irish breakfast. You have the like typical way of doing breakfast, right, in each country. And so I think that's very interesting, and I do love it. And then yeah, of course, when I'm back home, I just open the fridge and eat everything that I can possibly do. And I think it's not just about Italy. I think for me, it's also just some European standards of food. It's definitely different. I do think in Europe, overall, you can find a lot of quality in, meat. And I think it's just the way it is in Europe specifically, right? And each country in Europe has its own special food. So sometimes, yeah, like I miss a bit of that European, even just having like boutique places to go to. Because here, even like the bakery, yeah, sure, there are, but they're so expensive. They really are so expensive.
And it's
And
less
then you're
ingredients
not,
probably in
yeah,
a boutique one. It's like the French way of making bread is 3 ingredients, right? But they charge you an arm and a leg for it in other parts of the world.
exactly. It's hard, and it's a combo, sure, yeah, inflation, whatever. But it's also, I think, just consumer behavior, right? Here you go to the big supermarket, you have everything in one. It's, mostly decent, depends where you shop. But you don't have that, I think it's very European to be like, okay, I'm going to the butcher, I'm going to this, I'm going to the farmer's market. You find it, but here, at least in Canada, I find it that's more of a high-end almost option than just like, yeah, I find it's a bit more premium. I will not even talk about organic, which is technically premium everywhere. It's just more expensive because it says organic, right? So yeah, I think like from a consumer behavior and availability, like you can see the differences. But I think to be honest, it's exciting. Like when I first go to a country, I love to check out the grocery shops, like I just see the differences. And for me here, like my main thing was like, it's so huge. There's so much. Like what here is a normal supermarket, back home would be like ipermercato, like us, the ones that is like in the middle of nowhere because it's so big. You go once a month with your family. Like it's not like Tesco Express, You don't really have much of that kind of. Yeah. Even the Express is still like a full supermarket.
Just true. In London, perhaps, yeah, maybe not in the UK, the parts of the country, but in London for sure, it's everything you need is always there. And can I go going on to the rest of your time there? How have you found the kind of reverse culture shocks? So looking back at Italy or where you consider home, obviously you kind of spent your childhood in several countries, but if you can look back at Italy or you've already touched about kind of food and the ways in which it's done back home, but other parts of society, if you look back going, actually, I thought that was the pinnacle, but it's not as good, or is there things you miss or things you're really fond of home, which you wish you could take with you?
Yeah, it's both. And reverse culture shock is very big. And I think actually anybody, in my circle who's gone through the same, like also living abroad for a long time, I think that's a general thing that people have. And I think now people are starting to talk about it a bit more, but it wasn't really talked about much before because everybody worries about going abroad and doesn't necessarily think about going back. And it's torn. And especially regarding Italy, my heart is very torn a lot of the times. I love my country, generally think it's beautiful. And again, after living in different places, like I see the good in a lot of the places I've lived in. There's something I love in each country. And then, for me, Italy is like, I kind of find it like it has a bit of everything, right? You have the mountains, you have the lakes, you have beautiful beaches, you have great food. And I kind of like that Mediterranean lifestyle, like that slow living approach to things. But then there's things that there's a reason why I don't live there, right? And so where my heart breaks more regarding my own country is two things. One is definitely more political, economical, right? Hence why so many young people, so many young Italians emigrate. I mean, we've always been a bit of an immigration country overall throughout history with the wars and so on. But we call it in Italian la fuga dei cervelli, which means the escape of brains, right? Because now there's a lot of people, educated. They tell you have to have all these degrees and then you can't find a job. I mean, Italy is still one of the highest unemployment rates in Europe. And it's weird because Italy, like it's, like you would say like a first world country. There's like the economy isn't that bad. And yet it has these opportunities that are unfortunately missing, and especially for younger people. And then people leave and then the country ages and then you start getting all different sorts of social issues, right? And it breaks my heart to see that because at the same time, I hear, especially here in North America, you have a lot of people, especially in summer, they go back to Europe. And usually Italy is one of the destinations and they love it. And it warms my heart to hear. Like, I want everybody to have a great time, obviously, in my countries, as anybody would do for their own country, right? I want them to have a great time. I want them to be treated well. I want them to eat so much that they will never forget. Obviously, food and wine and that is part of the lifestyle, part of the culture. But then you also hear people who, had racist comments. And this side of Italy that is, I think, a bit newer to it, that is very unfortunate. And so in that sense, yes, there's things I miss. Could I live there right now? Probably not. And it's, besides, the job market in general is not as good as, for example, even just Canada or North America. But it's not just that. I think that it would feel a bit tight now. And I think that's something that I felt, and that's why I've never really stayed. I love to stay. I love to see friends and family, but, I love to visit. I would, love to guide people around Italy and have them explore my country. But to live there, I think as Italian, maybe I'm just being a bit more critical because there's a lot of people who, want to move there, want to retire there and so on. But for now, like, I find it's a bit tight, unfortunately. And there's political, economical reason. And then there's a bit of, I saw a shift in mentality that saddens me as somebody who knows like how well seen Italy is abroad. And then, yeah, you have certain anecdotes that get to you and you're like, oh, okay. Well, that's not nice, is it? So I don't know where it's headed, but it's still a beautiful country. It still has so much potential and it has, still amazing people in there. And I hope it, overall it gets better eventually.
No, I think it's a good point. And it's very interesting to see that it's the kind of the honeymoon period. People go on holiday and they see it for a short period of time, usually in the best time of year. If you go out of season, perhaps it's a bit different because all the seasonal work probably relies on a lot of tourism, like a lot of parts of the world. And that's, where people seem to make the money, and then the other half of the year they don't make any money because there's no jobs, and that's where it probably struggles. So you want to be a huge cheerleader for your own country because you realise actually that's fundamentally you need to have foreign investment in tourism coming in. As you said, there's not much opportunity for young people. Most of my team in the UK are Italian. It says a lot that all engineers come to do engineering in the UK, and it happens quite a lot, I think, which is unfortunate. But as you said, there's some government incentives to get people to move back and young people to be there with tax rates and things. And if you start to get enough people, you start to get enough new industries popping up, and it's obviously it's a generation of change as opposed to one parliamentary swing, which I think the issue is we have in Europe and I guess in the US as well. Time in Parliament so short that no one thinks about 10 years away. They always think about 4 years away or 5 years away. And that's probably, especially in Europe now, there's a rise of the right wing, which is quite a scary thought. Like France, Germany, Italy, the UK has got problems as well. And you think, oh no, it's there's a lot of hate happening all over, and maybe you do want to go live in Calgary where everyone's friendly, right?
Yeah, they hate other stuff. Yeah, it's not perfect, but yeah. No, and I think that's the issue, right? Like when hate takes over anything, whatever that is, it just destroys things, right? Things that can be good and things that are good. But yeah, you're right. Like especially in certain fields, a lot of Italians escape because l'Università di Pisa is one of the best universities is historically for engineering and like mathematics and all like that science kind of stuff. And so people, they have like whatever amount of degrees from there. They're qualified to do jobs and then they just can't find a job. And so I would say probably UK, it's a big one for Italians to emigrate to. And then Germany is another one, still like Germany, Switzerland. And then if that doesn't work, US, Australia, right? I mean, there's a lot of that also happening. People who are a bit more like, okay, I really want, I don't care where it is. I just want to go somewhere and work. And yeah, and that's sometimes how Italy loses some of the youth because it's not necessarily old people who, for example, myself, I was like, I wanted to like see the world and that was part of my goals, right? So I think no matter what, I would still decide to, go abroad for a different reason. But I think for those who actually would have liked to stay in Italy, they're missing them because, I mean, unfortunately, like you got to work. You got to do that kind of stuff, right? So you may love your country and try to work with it. But then if you keep on not finding a job, for example, or whatever it is, or not paid much to, live well, people are going to start to look elsewhere, right?
I completely, you raise a good point. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about being there before we go into the last section?
No, ready to jump on.
So hello and welcome back to the podcast. We're on section 3, which hasn't actually got a title. It hasn't since it started, but it's essentially a review of your time. So if you could kind of go back to your younger self, maybe not at 12, but perhaps at 18, or when you moved to across the pond, perhaps, and give yourself some advice for what it would be like to live abroad, maybe some warning of what struggles you might have or things you might want to do earlier. Not necessarily change, just maybe accelerate a certain process. Is there anything you'd say to yourself to kind of help you capitalize on the joys of living abroad?
Don't have necessarily advice to do something different. I think what I would tell myself is more like from a mindset, mental perspective, to know it will be okay, and to know that I actually, was doing the best I could with what I had. I was always very proactive and very like, I'm going to get this kind of thing, very stubborn or determined, depends what adjective. But sometimes when you do these big moves, you doubt yourself. The unknown makes you doubt. And so if anything, I would say more than from a, operational side of things, I would say from a mental side of things. And it sounds very cliche, but it kind of like trust. Trust that once you've put all the effort into it, it's gonna work out one way or the other. And trust that you're gonna grow. And I think I didn't realize how much growth and how much everything would shape me into the person I am today. And I'm pretty happy with who I am today. But I have to thank a lot of these opportunities. So to, trust and leave that fear on the side and not doubt yourself.
I think it's a very good point. And I guess the hurdles we face are what make us better or stronger, or it's a lesson. If we didn't face them, we would never have made the mistake and learned from it. Or it might have led to a really cool thing. You took a wrong turn in the neighbourhood and you found yourself in a nice new coffee shop or restaurant, or you met a friend, or you turned up to the wrong thing, and things worked out well. It's quite often happens in life. We make mistakes and they end up being a better use of time or a more enjoyable experience than maybe you would have had if you hadn't made a mistake. And they become the story briefly as well. If things go perfectly, nothing's really happened, right?
That's a very good point. Yes, like that's the thing. Things are not gonna go A, B, C, D, E in that order, even if you plan, right? So if you're just gonna ride the wave and learn from it, that's a big thing that moving abroad teaches you.
Yeah, your tolerance for bureaucracy probably increases living abroad, and patience probably as well, because it's not only another language a lot of times, but also it's a whole new system, a whole new approach to many things. For instance, like if you're from Southern Europe, you're probably a bit more, I wouldn't say impatient, but a bit more forward with like asking questions. Speaking about like my friends from Spain as well, they're more, they don't want to queue or wait patiently. But you go to Northern Europe, it's kind of the way, especially in Sweden, especially they're happy just to wait for things, and they're gonna sort it out. Whereas my friends from Spain, like, I don't trust them. What are they doing? It's taking too long, and they want to jump the queue and get it done because their time is worth more. So it's quite interesting to see like you gain this empathy, and different kind of customs in what you think is okay in your culture don't translate always. So you end up having to have this kind of universal approach to everything, which is quite a good skill for sure, especially with you're working internationally as well. It helps quite a lot.
I totally agree. I know my patience is probably more or less the same. I just know how to cope impatience better, just I think by aging more than anything, and being self-aware. But bureaucracy, no, it never gets easier in that sense. It's just you're just more psychologically prepared. But like, oh my god, just doing the paperwork, it's just never fun. I don't think it will. In my eyes, I will never have a moment where I'll be like, this is okay. I'll always be like, oh my god, I have to do so much. But it pays off, and I guess because of the reward you had once, like, okay, I gotta just go through it, and then I'll get a reward, which is a visa or whatever. But no, I don't think, and this is probably just how I am, I'm like, I don't think my patience towards bureaucracy will will chill. But in a way, yeah, like here in Canada, like there's really nothing. There's like a portal. Most of the time, there's just a portal. Portal doesn't care about how impatient you are. You just gotta wait. So it's more about, dealing with that and relaxing in between.
And hopefully being able to leave the country if it is waiting for visas, because sometimes that can be quite, I guess it can really hamper you, or it can clip your wings in such a way where you have to stay in the country for that long. My friend from India, he was getting his visa renewed in Sweden, and he basically had to stay there for the whole summer because he couldn't leave the country, not even to the parts of Europe. So that kind of meant he got to explore a lot of Sweden, but he was a bit like, well, I couldn't go home, or I couldn't see this people, and okay, it's one summer, but we only get like 80 summers in our life, so it's still one, it's just quite a depressing way of thinking about it. Going forward then for you, so do you have any plans to live anywhere else? Do you have any desires to move to a different place or see the world? You mentioned your work is online. Maybe it's an option for you.
No, to be honest, for now, I mean, moved here on this side of the country a couple of years ago. So still, within the same country, but still a different area. So still ready to explore. For now, I think I'm enjoying having a base, like a more stable base, and then kind of travel from it. So that's kind of my plan. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'm towards the end of that more nomadic sprint. I'm also on the other side because of, I guess, my lifestyle up until now. It's hard for me to say like where I'll be forever or where I'm gonna, like I take it a bit more. I'm not very much of like a 10-year plan kind of person. I think it's very hard to choose that far ahead. There's a lot of variables out of your control. So for the moment, I can speak for the next, year, couple of years. I think probably I'll be still happy unless something happens, still happy here and having my base here. And then, of course, we'll never stop traveling, obviously. But, just having from a living perspective, just nurturing what I have here.
Is your partner, are they from Canada, or are they also international as well? Or?
International, yeah. So international together.
So the opportunities to live abroad is always still within both of you. Are they Italian?
No, Irish actually. So yeah.
Oh right, okay.
Both Europeans. So
same colours on the flag, so it's fine. Well, very similar colours on the flag.
Yeah, right. I know. Sometimes it really looks the same. I'm okay with it. I like Ireland.
Both bad at rugby, so it's fine.
We'll censor that one.
Nations based joke. Yeah.
I know. I like rugby.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for spending your evening, or your afternoon, probably for you actually, my evening, with me on this call and sharing your amazing journey. And I don't know if you'd like to maybe share a bit more about the work you do online, and if people want to find you or work with you, they
Yeah, for sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I love to chat about everything expat, living abroad, moving abroad, and hopefully this episode helps somebody out there listening to this, right, with whether moving or getting through the first months in a new place, which is always harder and the harder part of the game. As per me, yes, you can find me at Our Connected World on Instagram. That's where you can, if you have any questions, follow up, whatever, you can simply DM me. I'm happy to help. And the way I help people is I have an academy, actually. It's called CW Academy, and within it I have different programs. I have the language side of the programs, as I mentioned, Spanish and Italian, to help people with that side of traveling and moving and learning a language that way. And a borderless career. I found throughout my experience, a lot of the people whether get stuck at zero, so they can't really fully they feel a bit lost in knowing, okay, what kind of remote work, right? Because it's not just about building a business. There's a lot of different options. There's freelancing option, there's remote work, and there's building your own business. So one program helps with that. And the other program is, taking my background in business and marketing. And so helping those who do want to build their own thing and be self-employed, and kind of helping them with, executing on those ideas and putting a plan together and actually getting, going live with it. So yeah, that's kind of what it is. I'm big on education. I'm big on empowering people. So it's all programs to help learning the skills, but also being supported in the way that you need in your own specific journey. I think everybody's on their own journey. And so tailored support is very important. And even more so when it's about transitioning to a new travel lifestyle, transitioning to a new career path where you feel particularly with doubts or a bit lost, right? And so it's important to support that way, because the world is a beautiful place out there, and it's important to see it. It's important to explore it and make the most of, this life that we have ultimately.
No, massively, yeah. No, I completely agree, and thank you for offering those services to people, and hopefully people on this call or listening or watching can find you and seek some, I guess, more tailored one-to-one advice to help them on their journey for sure.
Thank you, James.
Always. And always, if you have enjoyed the podcast and have found some new information you have enjoyed, please let us know in the comments. Please do share with your friends, family, your old school friends from university or wherever who may want to learn about living abroad or have done it and are interested in kind of, a nostalgia trip perhaps, because a lot of the times these conversations end up being a reflection for people listening as well. And as always, we'll see you next time for the Expat Pod.